Welcome to Independent Sources. I'm Gary Pierre-Pierre.
And I'm Viano Ravinka. President Obama's demands in his push for peace between Israelis and Palestinians have not been readily received by the Israeli government. Mr. Obama has called on Israel to end the expansion of Jewish settlements in areas where Palestinians hope to create a homeland.
On this edition of Independent Sources, we talk with two journalists from the Jewish media about the tensions between the Obama administration and the government of Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. We look at the divisions in the Jewish community here in the States as well as in Israel.
We learn how ethnic media organizations are making sure their communities can dial in when the country goes digital.
We meet a family from Iraq that's found refuge in New York, and we celebrate the best in ethnic media nationwide as Independent Sources goes to the New America Media Expo and Award ceremony.
All that and news of the week after this.
There are other larger issues and more important issues that need to be covered that we have to ensure that are in there, because folks will not find it in the Times or in some of the other papers. We have to make sure that that news that is ignored or missed, that we pick that up from week to week.
President Obama's stand against building any additional Jewish settlements has caused divisions in the U.S. and Israel. With me here in studio to discuss the growing tensions between the Obama administration and the Israeli government is Jerry Lippman, publisher and editor-in-chief of Jewish World. And joining us from Washington via Skype is Nathan Guttman of The Forward. Welcome.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Nathan, let me start with you. The exit polls at our last election showed that close to 80% of the Jewish vote went to Obama. Now, with the U.S. latest stance towards Israel and the settlements, where does Obama stand, do you think? What's his approval rate within the Jewish community?
Well, we don't have any new polls to indicate if there's any shift following in his pressure on Israel on the issue of the settlements, but we can look at the reactions of Jewish groups to try to gauge where Jewish organizations stand vis-a-vis Obama right now. And I think the main impression is that Jews are still very supportive of Obama. And even though they're very concerned about anything that seems to look like pressuring Israel, the settlement issue is not a key factor for most American Jews. They will not go out and pick a fight with the administration over the settlement issue. So by and large, I believe that the support for Obama is still very significant, even though we are hearing here and there some voices that seem to indicate that some Jews are feeling a little bit uncomfortable with what they see as too much pressure on Israel and not enough pressure on the Palestinian side.
Jerry, do you have the same feeling that within the community the settlement issue is not a key issue for the community?
Well, publishing in the New York and the Long Island metropolitan area, I tend to believe that there are segments of the community that are prepared to disagree with the approach of President Obama. I think President Obama is attempting to begin his administration's efforts via Secretary of State Hillary Clinton to a good faith attempt that the American government help to work a peace process in the part of the world where terrorism towards Americans and toward the state of Israel has taken place over the last couple of years.
And speaking of Hillary Clinton, you actually have an article in one of your latest papers titled "A Troubling Transformation. Clinton is less friendly towards Israel since her political rise." Do you sense more resentment towards Hillary Clinton within the community?
That's an excellent question. I'm an independent publisher for over 30 years. And in the year 2000, I supported editorially Hillary Clinton to be the senator from the New York State. I also supported her husband as president in 1992 and 1996. I do believe that Hillary Clinton has had a wonderful education and relationship with the American Jewish community, specifically the New York Jewish community. Nevertheless, I believe right now we are watching very carefully where her position is leading the State Department.
Nathan, are we now seeing more than ever an increasing number of Jews coming out against the settlements, and why now?
Well, we see, first of all, if you look at Israel, so I think the polls in Israel are pretty steady. Most Israelis understand that or accept the idea that settlements cannot go on forever and that there is a need to compromise with the United States and with the Palestinians on the issue of the settlements. Here in the United States, I think we also saw an interesting development when leading members of Congress, leading Jewish members of Congress who are known to be strong supporters of Israel, actually came out very strong against Netanyahu's refusal to discuss a settlement freeze. And I think that can indicate, in a sense, where the community stands on that. I believe that even if we go back to the 90s, to 91, 92, the last time the American administration clashed with an Israeli government over the settlements, I think the main lesson that the Jewish community learned from those events was that you can only push it so far on the settlement issue because it doesn't have that much support in Israel and it doesn't have that much support over here in the United States.
Jerry, what has been the tone of your paper covering the settlements issue?
We have published opinion and analysis pieces from both sides of the spectrum. We pride ourselves in packaging a weekly publication to inform the American, or specifically the New York Jewish community, on the positions that are being taken by the various Jewish organizations. Jewish organization life is similar to a melting pot in that we will always have diverse positions. But we never should forget the fact that Israel is the only democracy in the part of the world that we are now addressing, and that we as American citizens are being terrorized from within. Meaning, in effect, let's just take recently Riverdale, the attempt in the Riverdale community in New York City, in the Bronx, with regard to 2 synagogues possibly being blown up. That hit home very closely. Thank God for Homeland Security. Thank God for the FBI, the New York City Police Department. We were on top of this particular incident. But since that incident occurred, many of the synagogues have beefed up their protection, and we are much more closer. You could almost say we're closer to home. We can never equate the terrorist bombs going off by the suicide missions taken by Arab people against the Israelis. It's not that long, and this is the point that I believe that Mr. Obama, the president of our country, will sooner than later recognize that it was not that long ago that people were being blown up on the street, and that around many of the cities of Israel, walls have been put up since that time.
Right, and Nathan, you say in a recent article that this is the first time that an American president seems to have succeeded in isolating the settlements issue and disconnecting it from other elements of support for Israel. Why, in your opinion, is this president seemingly able to succeed?
Well, I think it's for a multitude of reasons. One of them is the fact that he's very energetic about moving forward with the peace process. This might not be the case in a year or two after he loses any kind of political capital trying to do that. But right now, he's investing everything he can in pushing forward, and he is focusing on the settlement issue. And actually, what that means, it means that people both in Israel and in the Jewish community over here, and the supporters of Israel in Congress, have to think if this is the main issue, if the settlements are the main issue they want to fight for when they fight for Israel. And this is why this separation is taking place right now. There's also the broader picture of the regional threats and mainly the threat of a nuclear Iran. And I think the message of the president, which is we have to cooperate with the moderates in the region in order to counter the Iranian threat, resonates very well with the Jewish community and with Israel. And people understand that even if you have to give up on the settlement issues in a certain way, it might be worthwhile because you'll get a broader coalition against Iran.
But you seem to say that there's almost a consensus within the Jewish community here and in Israel that we can hope for giving up of this settlement issue. Do Do you think that people are prepared to give up on the settlement issue? There are many people in New York who are against it. Is that right?
Well, first of all, I don't think the word consensus and Jewish community go together. There's never a consensus in the Jewish community or in Israel. So there are always many views, and we have to relate to all of them. And it's hard to gauge exactly where the community stands. We can look at the organizations, we can look at the individuals. I think there is support for the settlement issue on the right wing. You see a lot of that in New York, not so much of it in other places around the country. But I think the broader issue is not the settlements, but rather is Israel being pressured to do something it doesn't want to do. And that is the main issue. Right now, it seems that people, while not supporting the Israeli stand on settlements, they do support Israel in the sense that they feel that Israel should make its own democratic decisions.
Jerry, what impact, if any, do you think that Obama's stance towards Israel will have on the next election and the stance that the Democratic Party is now having? How will the Jewish people vote in the next election, you think?
It's always said that the Jewish people have a long memory. Sometimes we have a short memory. In this particular case, I think that Mr. Obama, our distinguished young president, is up against a situation where we will not forget what just occurred following General Prime Minister Ariel Sharon, who returned and gave Gaza and asked the people to leave. Many of the residents that have already left the settlements in Gaza are still today unsettled. Their families are spread in different parts of Israel. Many of the people have not found jobs. Some of the children have missed education. Some of the families are going through all different types of psychological needs.
Are you hopeful that Obama will get anywhere in his first term towards a more peaceful environment in the Middle East?
Again, the democracy of Israel is an established democracy. People go to the polls and they choose their prime minister. They chose Mr. Netanyahu as their prime minister based on his position that peace should come to the state of Israel, but it has to be a peace that allows the children to go to sleep at night and not be in bomb shelters, not to have terrorized people that go to work each day and are productive citizens for their state. One must remember that the state of Israel is quite successful financially, economically in the world.
And we'll have to wrap it here. Nathan Guttman of the Jewish Forward, Jerry Libman of the Jewish World, thank you very much for being with us in studio today.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Here's a look at some headlines from the ethnic media. From Caribbean Life, the International Monetary Fund, IMF, says the Caribbean and Latin America will recover quicker from the global economic downturn. The forecast says the region will be severely impacted only in the first part of this year due to its stronger public finances and policies. Countries with larger economies are expected to start recovery by the middle of next year. A Filipino couple in California is facing up to 215 years behind bars. That's from the Filipino Reporter. Wilfredo and Maria No, who own a healthcare agency in Orange County, pleaded guilty in April. The duo was charged with bringing, harboring, and employing illegal aliens, mostly from the Philippines. They also face a fixed fine of $10.7 million. The two will be sentenced on September 21st. From the Irish Echo, the Emerald Isle Immigration Center is sounding a wake-up call to undocumented Irish immigrants, telling them not to be afraid of calling the police or get medical treatment if they are a victim of a crime. This was in light of the death of Darren O'Donnell. O'Donnell was an undocumented Irish immigrant who died from injuries after he failed to seek medical treatment. The Amsterdam News reports that more women of color are getting into the political arena throughout the country. The most recent is Tamika Mallory. The 29-year-old African-American single mom is now the National Executive Director of the National Action Network, an organization started by Reverend Al Sharpton. And finally, from the Jewish Week, the First Hebrew Charter School in New York City is searching for a location. Hebrew Language Academy had planned to resume classes at IS 278 in September, but school officials are afraid that the neighborhood may not be welcoming. This was after the Marine Park Brooklyn community protested against the presence of a Jewish school. The community members say they don't want the school to be there permanently. Those are just a few headlines from the ethnic media. Back to Gary and Vianora in the studio.
This week, the country goes digital. Digital television conversion was set to happen in February, but was delayed because so many households had not converted. Now that the time has come, two ethnic media groups are making sure people in their communities stay tuned in. Angelette Nevert reports.
The future is here, right here in this box.
The DTV transition is coming on June 12th. But according to a recent Nielsen survey, 3.5 million households were still completely unready for the transition.
Corporate broadcasters have aired messages, but they haven't always been the most informative messages. They haven't talked about things like antennas or rescanning or the converter box selection. They mostly just basically alerted people to the fact that there was a transition and they should call the FCC's phone number.
That's where some ethnic media organizations like People's Production House have stepped in.
So one of the things I think that the federal government failed to realize about the way we get information is that it's not just through one big system. It's actually through a network of small systems. And I think that that's where something like the ethnic press is so important, because many people who get their information from the ethnic press are not getting it from other outlets.
People's Production House is a nonprofit organization dedicated to community education. With this work on DTV, it has testified before Congress, appeared on panels, and even set up converter boxes in seniors' homes. In helping individuals, Breitbart finds that persons reliant on retail stores are disadvantaged because the internet carries many more choices.
The retail outlets have been a very quiet problem in this whole process. Quiet in the sense that they haven't really been called to account the way they should be. They're participating in a federal program, and they should be doing a better job of providing a full selection to consumers.
Do you know how to connect your converter box?
HITN had already mounted its own education campaign before being contracted by the FCC.
40% of Latinos depend on over-the-air television. We noticed that with the programs that we were doing here, people were very confused, to say the least, as to what was going to happen. They were aware, but they were totally confused.
Since then, they have conducted about 2,400 workshops in key markets around the United States and trained about 35,000 people. In addition to turning to the ethnic media, the FCC has turned to grassroots efforts like town hall meetings and partnerships with volunteer organizations. They've even set up walk-in help centers to help spread the word. With all the issues of getting people prepared, Breitbart predicts the majority of the people will make the switch in June, but warns people to be wary of the success.
I think that this is really a lesson here in that we need to think about policies that serve the whole country and not start with the privileged and work our way out from there.
Angelette Levert for Independent Sources.
We'll be right back.
More than 21,000 Iraqi refugees now live in the U.S., some here in New York. This week, we feature another segment by a student at the CUNY Graduate School of Journalism. Rima Abdelkader produced this piece about a family that fled the war-torn country and settled in the city.
There is stores everywhere, once you need something.
She calls Brooklyn her home, but Baghdad remains very much on her mind. She recalls a day in 2005 when she was walking to work with her father.
And once we got to the road, they stopped us, and my dad, he tried to protect me. He hugged me. So then they separated us, and they shot him first, and they killed him in front of me.
She was also shot, taking bullets in her arm, shoulder, chest, and in her left lung.
Here, that's still hurts.
She was working with the U.S. military as a translator. She's convinced that's why she and her family became targets. And that's why Noor Abbas can't reveal her real name. Shortly thereafter, her mother and 3 brothers fled to Syria, joining a flood of refugees. In the last 6 years, almost 5 million Iraqis have left their homes. Abbas spent 2 months recuperating in a U.S. Air Force hospital before returning to work. After a year and a half of waiting for paperwork from U.S. immigration, and still afraid, she left Iraq. Arriving in the States with only $300, she immediately began to contact U.S. soldiers she worked with in Baghdad. She first went to upstate New York and then to Florida before returning by bus and settling here in New York. In anticipation of her family joining her, she saved up and rented an apartment in Bay Ridge, Brooklyn. She was reunited with them when they came as refugees from Syria. After a 3-year separation, Abbas's mom, Saif, now cooks her daughter's favorite Iraqi dish. The family reunion, however, is bittersweet. Saif's sons are depressed and miss Iraq. They both have degrees in engineering and can't find jobs. Agencies that work to resettle refugees say the work issue is the toughest challenge for Iraqi newcomers.
Most employers expect that you're going to kind of work your way up, take something more entry level, and make your way up in the field. So that comes as a big shock to many of the Iraqis.
What troubles Saif the most is that her youngest son didn't get to finish high school in Baghdad. Adjusting to a new life here in the States hasn't been easy. In Baghdad, the 54-year-old had a big home and a car. She misses the Iraq where her family was happy. She is considering going back to Iraq, despite the ongoing violence, so her college-educated sons can get good jobs and her youngest can complete his high school education. Even for Noor, life here is not what she expected. She is homesick herself.
Each country has its own flavor, own food and everything.
For the 29-year-old, however, it's more complicated. In March, Abbas married an Iraqi American. They met in Baghdad and were reunited in the U.S. and are now living in Virginia. Once again, Noor Abbas finds herself in a painful situation of being separated from her family and perhaps never returning to Iraq. For independent sources, I'm Rima Abdelkader.
You promised me the world. Is this what you had in mind?
Help EarthShare and its members restore balance to the world. Visit earthshare.org and see what you can do. EarthShare, one environment, one simple way to care for it.
New America Media is the country's oldest and largest ethnic media news service. The organization held its Ethnic Media Expo and award ceremony last week in Atlanta, and Independent Sources was there. Abi Ishola has the highlights.
Last week, hundreds of journalists, publishers, and advertisers flocked to Atlanta, Georgia for New America Media's National Ethnic Media Expo and Awards. A brave move for the organization at a time when a troubled economy has forced other media to cancel such events. Sandy Close of New America Media says now is the perfect time for journalists to get together.
Instead of doing what the American Society of Newspaper Editors did, which was cancel their annual conference, we decided to hold our conference as a statement of confidence and optimism about the role of ethnic media in creating better journalism for the future.
NAM has held previous conferences in cities on the East and West Coast. Moving the festivities to Atlanta was a strategic move.
If we're going to be working with, say, non-white media or media that's more diverse than the mainstream, we have to come to, say, the capital of Black America, for example. We have to come to one of the fastest, most fastest growing region for Latinos and Latino media in the United States. And the same applies for Asian media.
Some attendees say it's the type of event the ethnic media needs to gain more visibility.
People in ethnic media, certainly from around the country, don't get together very often, and this is actually only the second conference of this type that I've been to. And it's just wonderful to hear what is going on all around the country at newspapers, radio and TV stations, and in academic institutions.
NAM also invited several media educators to discuss how they could incorporate community media into their curriculum.
I personally would be interested in exploring a partnership, and that's one of the reasons that I came, just to try to get some questions answered and to see what the benefits are. We see a lot of diversity coming through our classrooms, and I think it would be a benefit for our students and not just, my research stream.
Even with all this enthusiasm about future collaborations, some participants were more concerned about the present. Steve Franklin of the Community Media Workshop in Chicago says many organizations that have become iconic in different communities are determined to stay alive at any cost.
The ethnic news media is a little different than other news media because they're almost suicidal. They'll lay everybody off, they won't make any money, but they'll keep functioning.
The first day of activities ended with the NAM Awards ceremony.
Put together, we're the new American.
Rong Xiaoqing of the New York-based Chinese newspaper Singtao Daily won first place in the International Affairs non-English language category. Her story was about Chinese children adopted by Americans. How does it feel to have picked up such a great honor?
Well, it's great. It's exciting. But as I said just now, I think more important is not me myself get this award. It's like everybody else is coming, and we can chat. We know more people. We need to work together now, especially in this tough time.
On the final day of the conference, members of the ethnic media set up shop to showcase their work here at NAM's Media Expo.
This is actually, I think, our third or fourth year doing this particular exhibition at the Expo. We love it. I mean, every year that we come, we get to meet new people. We get to see what other outlets and publications are out there.
It's a great opportunity for us just to meet different parts of the ethnic media and ethnic community and other people who want to work with ethnic media.
An opportunity that NAM hopes will be available to members of the ethnic media for years to come. Abi Ishola for Independent Sources.
That's our show. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you next week.
In the meantime, be independent-minded.